According to The Independent, private companies are now racing to try to change the climate. You've heard of climate change, regardless of where you put on the spectrum the fault of humans and carbon combustion. The Earth is warming. It is causing problems for those of us who are still inhabiting it, and a lot of different approaches at trying to solve it. Now, let me be very clear with you and upfront. I am not a climatologist. I am not a meteorologist, and I am not someone with a PhD in any geological sciences or any material sciences or a physicist. So having gotten all that out of the way, I do think it's important for you and me as laypersons trying to understand various solutions being talked about and proposed regarding climate change. This is a heavily controversial type of a fix. Now, the standard fix is let's use less carbon. Let's switch to solar energy. Let's stop putting carbon into the atmosphere so that we don't heat things up more. That's the standard approach endorsed by most of the scientific community and most people concerned with climate change. There are, however, some solutions that are not quite mainstream, but they're not so kooky that I feel it'd be irresponsible to talk about them with you. So one of them is a heavily funded startup known as Stardust Solutions. They've raised tens of millions of dollars, and this is getting investors excited. Some scientists, I won't say all, some scientists are alarmed by this because they fear the consequences of trying to send rockets up, putting essentially dust in the air to block the sun's rays, hence cooling the Earth's atmosphere. So Stardust has raised $60 million. Let's look at the facts. It's the largest private geoengineering investment ever. There have been other ventures like this. It's a difficult thing to do because you've got to get things in space. You've got to put so many particles up there before it has much of an impact. And you have governments, not just in the place where you're launching, but all over the world, who could say you're really tampering with their societies and could be quite unhappy about this. Now, currently, there's no global ban on geoengineering. 19 U.S. states have proposed restrictions. This company is looking at launching 213 balloons. They want to put sulfur dioxide up into the air, particles that would block the flow of light from the sun and therefore the heat of the sun. The concept is it would cool the earth and keep us from boiling over, keeping us from burning up. Fewer forest fires and all the rest. That's the theory. Now, according to Yanni Yedved, he's a Stardust co-founder. Given the escalating crisis, it would be irresponsible not to do the work now. To be clear, there are many mainstream climatologists, scientists, those working on global warming, who think this whole line of thought is too extreme, too dangerous, kind of taking people off their eye off the ball of what we really should do, which is burn less fossil fuels. David Keith, a climate scientist at the University of Chicago, says this is total, unadulterated bull, and he says something else. Now, from the other extreme, the Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin says this is climate extremism. It has overtaken common sense. So he sees it as climate extremism. Let's go back a minute, because you may be still thinking, I don't know if I really understand this, TJ. What are you talking about? Here it is in a nutshell. Let's go back in time. In 1815, in Indonesia, there was Mount Tambora. It was a volcano, and it went off. It was the largest volcanic eruption in recorded human history. It released 60 megatons of sulfur dioxide. It was blasted into the stratosphere. Now, the ash and sulfur formed sulfate aerosols, which reflected sunlight back into space. So here's what happened. Global average cooling went down between 0.4 and 0.7 degrees centigrade. So almost as much as 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit. In parts of the world, in Europe and North America, it cooled as much as 3 degrees for the whole year on average. So that is a substantial global cooling. Obviously, if you could figure out how to do it, not hoping for a volcano to erupt, but if you could actually put a knob adjusting the thermostat of the globe, we wouldn't have to worry about global warming. It's not that easy, though. But that's the genesis of this technology, of what they're trying to do. They figure, hey, volcanoes put stuff in the air, it cools things down. What if we put stuff in the air? And that's not exactly the scientific terminology, but you get the overall picture. So 1816, the very next year, became the year without a summer. It snowed in June in New England. There were crop failures across Europe. So it wasn't like this was some unbridled, wonderful thing everyone was celebrating, but there wasn't a problem with global warming back then. It caused famine, food riots, mass migration, indirect cultural effects. Mary Shelley began writing Frankenstein during this cold, dark summer. So it is pretty significant. Other volcanoes have gone off and had cooling effects as well. So that's the theory. And I have to tell you, I am intrigued by this. And again, if you think I'm way off, you can poo-poo me in the comments. Feel free to do so. But I got to tell you, it doesn't look like global agreements, international law, since that's being scoffed at these days in many quarters. It doesn't really look like the world is going to get its act together, just reducing its reliance on coal, on oil, on natural gas. It's slowing down somewhat, but it doesn't seem to be doing it to the point where any serious climatologist thinks, okay, we're going to be fine now. No need for anything extra or draconian. If we just continue on the current path, global warming will calibrate and will level off and everything will be fine. I'm not seeing anyone say that. So that's why I think we have to at least look at some of these technologies. Now, again, the concern is, just as I mentioned, it happened in 1815. It caused riots, famine, food shortages. So once you change the temperature in one country and maybe you make it a little better, you could make it a lot worse in 10 other countries. You could cause famine. You could cause floods. The weather is a tricky thing, the way it's interrelated across countries, continents, in the world. So it's not to be taken lightly, but it is a possible solution. Now, at some point, if we truly, truly have quantum energy and fusion energy, where we have energy essentially for free, if we ever get to that point, then there could be all sorts of things that are similar. I mean, in theory, you could make teeny tiny mirrors, put them on drones, send them up at various places in the atmosphere, reflect the sun back into space, and be so precise about it, you could almost adjust worldwide temperature like a thermostat. Now, I'm not predicting that that's happening anytime soon, but in theory, if we really could get energy to the cost of zero, well, then something like that would be possible. So I'm going to put myself down in the category of we should experiment with this, but there needs to be heavy regulation. It shouldn't just be a bunch of rando libertarian rich guys who say, I've got an island in the South Pacific. What the heck? Let me shoot it up. And it really wreak havoc on farming, on famine, on cultures, perhaps around the globe. So we're going to see more and more talk of this. I've followed this industry now for a number of years. It does pop up occasionally. It's kind of interesting in that both the community of people who really are fighting global warming and think it's a serious problem often are talking it down. And as I shared with you, the Environmental Protection Agency head and the Trump administration also says it's extremist. So they are kind of getting battled around from various sides.